Like I mentioned, with respect to table cells, the entire row in this case would be clickable, not just a single cell. Even though the link is only associated with this particular SKU over here, the user can actually click on anywhere in the row and it would actually trigger the appropriate action. Second thing is that all of our data grids are sortable, so ascending and descending sorts. So we don't have enough items to actually show paging. I'm just going to pick another. Let's try MP3 players.
Was that constantly written, the row clicking?
Yes, it was an extension that we added. Basically, when the data grid initializes, it pulls in another JavaScript file, and there are basically event listeners that are tied to every row that we render. So as you can see, in this particular case, it also adds a data page implementation at the bottom. You can have that at the top or the bottom or both, however we choose to. Our users like it at the bottom, so that's it. Can everybody hear me?
Absolutely.
And paging works the same way. All of the paging is done at the server side. You can, previous to next. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn things over to Keith. He's going to talk about usability and user technology maturity.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Oh, great. I'm going to talk to you about some usability and issues related to our user technology maturity that they alluded to earlier. How do we provide user and developer-friendly validation? Validation is a strong point of SEAM and JSF. However, there's some trickiness to accomplishing it in some certain scenarios. We do use the Hibernate validator annotations on our entities as well as on our actions. So for instance, on the screen that we just all showed, the item field, for instance, is a required field, so we might have an annotation on the value that that's bound to. And we also have inline business logic, for instance, optionally required fields, fields that are dependent on other things that are going on in the current screen. What we did was we extended the SEAM UI decorate to give us some control over error messaging. A lot of times you have users who they make a mistake and you want to reinforce to the user exactly what they need to do to correct that mistake. So we, a lot of times on our edit screens, we have a lot of fields there, and you can't just say, you haven't filled in all the required fields. That's not good enough. We want to be able to tell them as much information as possible in order for them to effectively manage the problem. So that on that UI decorate, we go ahead and intercept on the process decode, the process update, the process validators methods. And on that UI decorate tag, we have a label attribute that exposes to the current scope the label to use. So for instance, on the item screen, the item inquiry screen that Kunal showed, the item field is that the name item is exposed. And so for a required field or you enter it in bad text or something, we can actually refer to that item field in the error message. And then last of all, we try to make use of AX for JSF to re-render parts of the screen quickly that the user can then make use of to fix the issue. So we might re-render the label, error messages at the top of the screen that might say something's required. And then we style the input components, as you can see on the screen, kind of reinforcing what's going on. And then they can access a tooltip that as well relates back to the error message that they saw at the top. So they know, okay, I need to type in something here. How do we incorporate exception handling in a web app? This is a common problem. I know I've seen some write-ups by various people about, JSF is great, but it's tied to the container, the web XML, some of the deficiencies that are there. So for instance, you cannot put an error page that is a basic JSF page that's a basic. So we took some approaches to help to minimize and help to enable our developers to create a better application using one technology, not having to switch between different views. So all of our common exceptions, such as if I were to open up a document and someone else were to open up a document and I save first, when they go to save, there could be an issue. So we try to handle that in a page like XML. We print out a message saying, so-and-so already saved. any kind of runtime exceptions, which I'm going to show a demo of a scenario. Like if our central office connection goes down, we try to handle that within the action or service layer instead of telling the user, oops, there's something bad going on. We hide that from them. And then last of all, any kind of unexpected exceptions, which do occur. Within the web XML, there's an error page that says, okay, when an error happens, like a 500 error or 404 error, I want you to go to this screen. So we wrote a servlet that we redirect that to. That servlet is necessary because the JSF lifecycle is invalid as soon as the original exception is propagated from the Java code. So you might think, oh, I can just redirect to my error page.jsf. You can't do that. And as soon as you try to render that screen, you're going to end up encountering a lot of errors that show up on the screen. It's going to hide the actual error that the user just encountered. So our servlet would capture any of the error code information, for instance, stack tracing, for debugging purposes, as well as who the user is, what server they were on, the time. We'd go ahead and expose that to scope, the session scope, and we redirect, not forward, to a JSF error page, which then that error page loads that back out of the session and we can display to the user. How do we work around time-consuming operations? This is something that happens a lot, especially because of our limited bandwidth in the central office. We have scenarios where we want to look up something and we want to perform an operation, but we want the user not to give up on the operation or to try to retry because that would be bad. So what we do is we try to render the page as quickly as possible with whatever is available to store. So for instance, on an item, we know what the item name is, we know a little bit of the details about the item, but we don't know all the classification information or all the pricing information that might be used for that item. We then so after the page is rendered, we go ahead and use an AJAX or JSF poll tag to kick off the time-consuming operation in the background. You get the little candy cane, you saw that on some of the screens they were working through the demo. We go ahead and fetch that data, we merge it in the action back into the original domain model that we're holding on to in the action, and we re-render the portions of the page that are important. This is refresh friendly because we can capture the fact that they already performed the action, so if they click that 5 over and over again, we don't have to refetch that data until we need to, which I will demo that. Another interesting scenario is how do we make an autocomplete work like an HTML select? A lot of you probably saw the autocomplete that Mark typed in a store name, Orlando, for instance, and he got some suggestions on what some possible matches. An HTML select has, you might oftentimes put options into the select tag that you have a label that's displayed to the user, and then you have an underlying code value, like maybe it's a primary key value that it's not going to make any sense to the user. But we wanted an autocomplete to behave the same way, so we would display in the input field the friendly text, but then in the background we have the primary key information that we can then post with our page. So we built a custom JSF component extending Yahoo UI's autocomplete tag to get our nice little functionality there. There wasn't really an autocompleter that we were satisfied with back when we were working on this last year. It accepted converters. We could decouple the input value from the actual entity key. So you type in Orlando. We might display the name of the store. If we had to convert it to and from Orlando and the store number, or we could choose to on the fly change it. Maybe we actually do want to display the store number, and we just drop it with the converter. And then we have facets which allow the customization of the autocomplete, the header, the footer, as you saw. You select the store name number, you can see up there, or the results. A lot of times, users typing something and it gives them an indicator of how much they really need to filter before they're sure this is what they want. And then the labels that are displayed. So we can put anything, within the XHTML and Facebook file, they can put, I want to display an image for this, I want to display text, the combination of text. It's all available to the developer. And I'm going to go into a demo. I want to show you the time-consuming operation as well as the validation. So I might go ahead and forget to go ahead and click find, but I forgot to type an item number. I see my items required. I go ahead and type in. Let's see if I can remember the one I'm interested in here. Oh, it's not. I'm sure I've got one of the digits split there. Okay, I was potted meat. I don't know about you, but I love potted meat. I'm not going to go into the details about the data table here, but I do want to talk to you about what happens when I go and, let's say I'm interested in what's the inventory of this item. Maybe if you're in Orlando, because I really want some potted meat right now. So when I click on one of these rows, the page is going to render, and you're going to see a candy cane, kind of saying, hey, there's still something going on here. And it's going to go ahead and call back to central office, fetch the inventory information, and then re-render it on the screen. I could choose at any point in time to abandon by going back, clicking cancel, going somewhere else. But I do want to know what's here. Well, that's New Jersey, because that's my store. But I want to see what's going on here in Orlando.
Ocean City.
This is taking a while because it is contacting our servers back at the... Oh, is that VPN turned on? No, I don't. That's why you get the NA. Just hold on a second. Let's see if I can get this real quick. There's an example of gracefully handling the error.
Nice.
If it works, great. If not, we'll just move on.
Is the UI autocomplete a Java library?
No, Yahoo UI, it's, so you might have heard of prototype scriptaculous, or it's just a setting. It's a JavaScript toolkit for 1.0 rich internet stuff. Yay, it returned. There's enough for probably everybody here. Okay, switching to users, these are very specific things for our user base, and maybe you encountered some of the same things. How do we forgive a clickaholic or typeholic? Kunal talked about the scenario where the user's typing in all the full 9-digit SKUs. We also have scenarios where a user might double-click, triple-click, quadruple-click. How do we deal with that? We want to act on the most recent event because that's most likely the one that the user is intending, not necessarily the first action they took. And then, in the meantime, we want to ignore anything else that's going on, all the prior events that are happening on the screen. We just want to take action on the last one. We try to go with Ajax for JSF, event queue, request delay, ignore people responses. But that almost does it. It acts on the first event. So we build our event queuing widget, JavaScript widget, and then we front end that with JSF component. We only handle the last event. So user starts typing in ORL, and then pauses for a second, and then types ANDO. We only want to take action on the full text of the screen, not the original ORL. So we don't have to worry about canceling that event or pounding our server with requests. So we schedule an event to occur a little bit after when the user finishes, so maybe half a second, quarter of a second. If anything else happens on that event queue in the meantime, we'll reschedule the new event and cancel the original one. This prevents multiple click scenarios, quick typing scenarios, as well as we can connect an event queue to multiple widgets on the screen. Maybe like 2 buttons, we only want them to act on one at a time. How do we forgive transaction abandonment? We have transactional screens like the transfer out screen. Users in there, users doing things. User clicks something that takes them away. We want to give them all the opportunity, just like you might get in a word processing application, to, yes, are you sure you want to leave this before finishing what you were doing? So we build a JSF component that attaches to the JavaScript window on before a load event. This would then prompt them if when they perform an abandonment action. And then we have a second JSF support component that we wrote that ignores window on before and load for certain actions. So for instance, the sync button, we don't want to ask you, are you sure you want to do this? Of course you do. And then, so this allows us to track for accidental or intentional window closing, cancel buttons that are on almost all of our screens, as well as any kind of unintended action, like they might maybe accidentally click the log out at the top of the screen. How do we deal with confusing multi-window operation? Steam does support comp conversational workspace management. This is something that is good for our users. We have a touchscreen with limited real estate. Oftentimes it's hard to know that there's a window open in the background because we do only have an 800 by 600 available. So we avoid any JavaScript window not open. Instead, we've substituted, as Mark showed in the demo of the PDF, inline displaying of PDF using RichFaces modal panel. And this works really nicely because, like on the touchscreen, we can then have a scrolling modal panel that displays PDF or maybe a wizard, for instance. And then we designed our page flow to be deterministic. The user doesn't often have to jump out and accomplish something over here and then come back over there. They're not going to remember that. So when you pop up an inline modal panel, it hides what else is going on in the background, but you can see enough of the details that you know where you're at. In wrapping up, we have successfully developed and deployed these applications. It's in 860 plus stores nationwide right now. There's probably some being deployed today. The full deployment is expected, as Mark said, in 2008. We did this in, let's say, 5 or 6 months with a pretty small staff, and I think we're happy. I'm pretty sure our boss is happy because he's sitting out there. Web development is challenging, but the right technology choices can definitely ease your pain. I just want to leave you with that. These are some links and our contact information. This will, of course, be posted probably wherever these slides are available. But if you have any questions, we'll be up there. Thanks.
Like I mentioned, with respect to table cells, the entire row in this case would be clickable, not just a single cell, even though the link is only associated